Dodging and burning is a photography technique that's been around since the darkroom days, and it helps you take an image and apply selective lightening and darkening to the areas of your choice. You can take an image like the one on the left-hand side of the screen, and without adding any form of contrast other than just burning and dodging by hand, you can create an image like the one on the right. It's an extremely powerful tool that you actually have access to in perfect black and white. Let me go ahead and show you how it works. When you bring an image into perfect black and white, on the left-hand side of your preview, there's a small tool well. Right up at the top, there's something called the brightness brush, which I can click on and select. This is the tool that we're going to use to dodge and burn, or lighten and darken, the parts of our photo. Up in the tool options bar, we first want to set our mode. We have two different options. We can choose whether we'd like to lighten or darken. I'm going to go ahead and start out by darkening first. I can then change things like the size, the feathering amount, the intensity, and I can have access to the perfect brush. When dodging and burning without the perfect brush, I like to make sure that the size of my feathering amount around the edge of my brush is all the way up at 100. I also like to make sure that the amount or strength of the darkening that I'm going to create is extremely low. Many times I drop my amount all the way down to under 10. I keep it extremely low so that I can gradually paint in darkness without going overboard. The last option, the perfect brush, is completely up to you and the image that you're working on. For this photo, I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. Once I have my options all set, I can then jump down onto my image, and with my brush tool, all I have to do is click and drag over the areas that I want to darken. When working on portraits, it's a great rule of thumb to create high contrast in the face by darkening things like eyebrows, areas of makeup if they have eyeliner or eyeshadow on, so we can click and drag over both of these areas. It can also be extremely useful to darken things like lips. This would be a perfect instance to turn the perfect brush on up in your tool options bar. We want to be extremely exact about darkening the lips, whereas areas like the eyebrows and the eyeshadow around the eyes can be a little bit softer. The lips are very exact. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger, and we're just going to click and drag a couple of times to create that darker hue. This can also be useful for darkening areas in the foreground and the background. In this image here, the subject was shot against a black backdrop. However, in the process of bringing the image onto the computer, the background appears hazy and a darker gray. We want to intensify the contrast between the foreground and the background, so I'm going to go ahead and make my brush quite a bit bigger. You can use the left and right bracket keys to change the size of your tool. I'm also going to turn off the perfect brush in my tool options bar because I don't necessarily need it. Now with that nice large brush, I'm going to click and drag across the backdrop as well as her hair to blend them in to create a higher intensity. This tool can also be useful for shaping areas of your image. We can use it to par down the edges of her shoulders. Just by clicking and dragging a couple of times, we can actually change the shape along the edge of the portrait. Another great thing to do with this large soft edge brush is to apply things like shadows on the image that should be there. For a portrait, this is wonderful for creating dimension on someone's face that may appear a little bit flatter on screen. I'll take my brush and click a couple of times right along the underside of where her cheekbones are to create more of a 3D effect along the subject's face. You can also use this same technique to do things like shaping the edges of someone's nose, their lips, and around their eyes. Now, along with the darkening option, you can also lighten areas of your image. We want to make sure that we brighten up parts of the face, so we'll go up to my tool options bar and swap my mode over to lighten. Just like we did before, I want to keep my feathering amount high around 100. I want to keep my amount very low around 7, and I can choose to use my perfect brush on and off. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger with my right bracket key, and I'm going to click and paint over the parts of the image that need to be a little bit brighter. Lightening can be a great way to even out parts of the skin. She had a couple of areas along her nose that were darker or lighter, and just by clicking and dragging, we evened out that area so we don't see quite as many bumps or lumps right along the edge or bridge of the nose. This is also a great tool to do things like lighten up under eye circles. Just by clicking and dragging, we can brighten up that area right underneath her eyes. You can also use it to contour the face, just like we did when we applied the darkness underneath her cheekbones. You can brighten areas like the chin, above the lips, and under the nose, and under the eyebrows. This is a great way to pull up the eyes and make them appear just a little bit bigger. The same technique can be used on landscapes as well. Now let's take a look at our before and our after. This is our image with dodging and burning. This is our image with no dodging and burning. As you can see, there's a huge change between the two. We took a photo that appeared extremely flat with no definition on the background or the face, and we separated the foreground from the background and contoured the entire model's face to make it appear a little bit more 3D without touching any of the contrast sliders on the right-hand side of my screen. Dodging and burning is an extremely versatile tool and can be used on all different types of photos.